Medicare changes could completely wipe out your gains, and which recipients will be hit hardest by these new adjustments. Stay until the end, because I'll reveal the shocking reality about whether this increase will actually help or hurt your financial situation. Welcome back to we break down the financial changes that affect your everyday life. If this information helps you plan better for your future, hit that like button and subscribe for more updates on benefits, finances, and economic changes that matter to you. The Social Security Administration has released their preliminary projections for the 2026 cost of living adjustment, and the numbers are landing between 2.5% and 2.7%. Now, before you get excited about what sounds like a decent increase, let me break down exactly what this means and why it might not be the good news you think it is. This percentage isn't just pulled out of thin air. The final COLA number depends entirely on inflation data that will be collected from July through September of this year. The government looks at the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers during these 3 months and compares it to the same period from the previous year. Whatever that percentage increase is, becomes your COLA adjustment. So what does a 2.5% to 2.7% increase actually mean in real dollars? Right now, the average Social Security beneficiary receives about $1,160 per month. If we use the higher projection of 2.7%, that would add roughly $50 to your monthly check for those receiving $2,000 monthly. And yes, new beneficiaries are hitting this milestone for the first time. You'd be looking at about $54 more each month. Here's the scale we're talking about. As of May, 74.29 million Americans receive Social Security benefits. That's nearly 1 in 4 people in this country depending on these payments. When the government announces a COLA increase, it affects more people than live in most countries around the world. But here's where things get complicated. And this is the part that's shocking millions of recipients. While your Social Security check might go up by $50 or $54, there's another change happening simultaneously that could completely wipe out these gains. Medicare Part B premiums are projected to increase by $21.50 per month in 2026. Now you might think, well, that still leaves me with about $30 more per month. But that's not how the math works for most people, and here's why. For the majority of Social Security recipients, Medicare Part B premiums are automatically deducted from their monthly payments. So when your Social Security goes up by $54, but Medicare takes an additional $21.50, you're really only seeing a net increase of about $32. That's assuming you're getting the full 2.7% COLA, but it gets worse. This $21.50 increase represents one of the largest Medicare Part B premium jumps we've seen in recent years. To put this in perspective, let's look at what happened in previous years. In 2024, Medicare Part B premiums increased by about $9.80. In 2023, they actually decreased slightly. So this projected $21.50 increase is more than double what we saw just 2 years ago. The reality is that for many recipients, especially those on fixed incomes, this so-called cost of living adjustment will barely keep them treading water, if that. When you factor in rising costs for housing, food, utilities, and other essentials, a net increase of $30 to $35 per month doesn't go very far. Now, let's talk about who gets hit hardest by this situation, because it's not affecting everyone equally. Low-income Social Security recipients are facing a disproportionate impact, and there are several reasons why. First, many lower-income beneficiaries don't file tax returns. This matters because middle and higher income earners can often take advantage of tax deductions and credits that help offset rising costs. If you're not filing taxes, you're missing out on potential benefits loan. Key the earned income tax credit or deductions for medical expenses that exceed certain thresholds. Second, lower income recipients typically spend a higher percentage of their income on basic necessities. When Medicare premiums go up, utilities increase, or food costs rise, it takes a bigger bite out of their budget compared to someone who has additional income sources. Geographic location also plays a huge role. If you're living in a high-cost area like California or New York, that extra $30 per month barely covers the increase in property taxes, let alone rent or mortgage payments. Meanwhile, someone in a lower-cost state might find that same $30 goes a bit further, but it's still not keeping pace with inflation. Here's something that might surprise you. Even though new beneficiaries are receiving $2,000 monthly for the first time, This amount often isn't sufficient to cover basic living expenses in many parts of the country. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in most major cities now exceeds $1,500 per month. Add in utilities, food, transportation, and healthcare costs, and you're looking at expenses that far exceed what Social Security provides. This brings us to a fundamental problem with how cost of living adjustments are calculated. The current system doesn't account for the fact that seniors and disabled individuals often face higher inflation rates than the general population. Healthcare costs, for instance, typically rise faster than the general inflation rate. But the COLA calculation uses a broad measure that includes items like electronics and clothing, which seniors spend less on. The tax filing issue I mentioned earlier reveals another layer of inequality in the system. While a middle-class retiree might be able to deduct medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of their adjusted gross income, someone who doesn't file taxes gets no such relief. This means that the people who need the most help are often the ones who benefit least from the current system. There's also the question of whether the timing of these adjustments makes sense. COLA increases typically take effect in January, but by then, many recipients have already been dealing with increased costs for months. Medicare Part B premiums, prescription drug costs, and other healthcare expenses don't wait for the new year to start climbing. Looking at the bigger picture, we're seeing a pattern where Social Security increases are consistently being offset by rising Medicare costs. This isn't a coincidence or a temporary issue. It's becoming the norm. Over the past decade, Medicare Part B premiums have increased at a rate that often matches or exceeds Social Security COLA adjustments. So what does this mean for the future? Unless there are significant changes to how these adjustments are calculated or how Medicare premiums are structured, millions of Americans are going to continue finding themselves in a position where their cost of living increase doesn't actually increase their standard of living. The community needs to start having serious conversations about potential solutions. Some policy experts suggest separating Medicare premium increases from Social Security COLA calculations. Others propose using a different inflation measure that better reflects the spending patterns of seniors and disabled individuals. There's also discussion about implementing a minimum COLA that ensures Social Security recipients always see some real increase in their purchasing power, regardless of what Medicare premiums do. But these are policy changes that would require congressional action, and we all know how challenging that can be. For now, the reality is that millions of Social Security recipients are going to receive what sounds like good news about their 2026 benefits, only to discover that their actual financial situation hasn't improved much, if at all. The 2.5% to 2.7% increase sounds significant until you realize that Medicare and other rising costs are eating up most or all of those gains. This isn't just about numbers on a government spreadsheet. This is about real people trying to maintain their dignity and independence on fixed incomes. It's about seniors having to choose between medication and groceries, or between heating their homes and paying for health care. The projected 2026 changes highlight a systemic problem that goes beyond just one year's adjustments. Until we address the underlying issues with how these benefits are calculated and coordinated, millions of Americans will continue to fall further behind despite receiving what are technically increases in their Social Security payments. What do you think needs to change about the Social Security and Medicare system? Have you or someone you know been affected by these kinds of adjustments? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on financial changes that affect your everyday life. Breaking news that could impact millions of Social Security recipients. The 2026 cost of living adjustment numbers are in, and they're creating more problems than solutions for many retirees. In this video, you'll discover exactly how much your Social Security check will increase in 2026, why Medicare changes could completely wipe out your gains, and which recipients will be hit hardest by these new adjustments. Stay until the end, because I'll reveal the shocking reality about whether this increase will actually help or hurt your financial situation. Welcome back to We Break Down the Financial Changes that Affect Your Everyday Life. If this information helps you plan better for your future, hit that like button and subscribe for more updates on benefits, finances, and economic changes that matter to you. The Social Security Administration has released their preliminary projections for the 2026 cost of living adjustment, and the numbers are landing between 2.5% and 2.7%. Now, before you get excited about what sounds like a decent increase, let me break down exactly what this means and why it might not be the good news you think it is. This percentage isn't just pulled out of thin air. The final COLA number depends entirely on inflation data that will be collected from July through September of this year. The government looks at the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical